Hello everybody and welcome to my channel. In this series what I am doing is to raise some questions about translation studies. I am talking about specific points that I encountered in my studies in translation. These questions are going to be under the title More Questions Than Answers. In fact, I hope nobody is going to expect me to give specific answers to those problems in translation. My concern today is about culture in translation. There's something very interesting about that. In the majority of the studies, at least to the best of my knowledge, when people talk about culture and its important role in translation, people would talk about metaphors, would talk about jokes, would talk about humor, about proverbs, and other such issues, maybe collocations, that do not have equivalence between languages, from Arabic into English, for example. I'm going just to cite some examples about this. The first one is like to say in Arabic, على نفسها جنات براقش. It has a long story, and when you say this is just a proverb, which means that you have done something wrong because it is you who made it. It is you who did not pay attention to the details. Now in Arabic it has to do with the dog called Baraqish, and that this dog barked at night or somewhere, and the enemies, because of the barking of the dog, managed to locate the tribe that they are attacking, and they go and attack the tribe because of the dog. So they say that the dog is the one that caused the problem. In English, when we talk about that in English, maybe in specific contexts, we could say you have only yourself to blame. You have only yourself to blame, or you blame only yourself. This kind of translation is going to be a bit difficult to make because, first of all, you need to understand the cultural norm where the proverb happens in the source language, and then you try to see something similar in the English language. If you do not find a match or equivalent, what you have to do now is to try to find something closer to the culture, something that can achieve the same function. Hence we hear about ideational equivalence or functional equivalence. We hear about dynamic equivalence of Eugene Naida and other strategies used by people and the students of translation, like Peter Newmark, when he talks about communicative translation and semantic translation, adaptation, etc., etc. There is, however, a problem. Still, we do not know what culture is. Most likely, when you talk about culture in translation, people talk about cultural issues related to the history of the people, to the differences between nations that account for the untranslatability of certain elements of the talk or written speech. What I wanted to talk about is a bit different. What is culture? What is really culture about? This is a very important question that we have to answer in order to deal with cultural issues in translation. I would like just to cite an example, by the way. It is about the word deadline. Deadline is translated into Arabic as the last appointment or the last date, which is al-maw'id al-akhir. But originally, the word deadline comes from a line that is drawn surrounding the prison facility. And if any prisoner would pass this line, which is called the deadline, the soldiers would shoot him and he would be dead. For that reason, it's called deadline. There is another expression which is called time is running. Time is running out. How can time run out? The origin of this phrase, time is running out, goes back to the use of the hourglass. The hourglass has two parts, and it uses sand. When the sand runs out, in other words, flows out of the upper part into the lower part, then it means that time is moving fast, or is moving anyway. And hence we have the expression time is running out. What happens in these two examples, deadline, time is running out, even in the same boat, and other expressions, is that they are now orphanized from their original parents. In other words, they are not related to them anymore. Nobody remembers the deadline, the story about the prisoners. Nobody remembers the story of the people who were in the same boat quarreling, and somebody said to them, look, we are in the same boat, we are in the same circumstances. Nobody certainly remembers the story of the hourglass when they say time is running out. This is what we call dead metaphors. The metaphor has become dead. And this is an under-researched area, at least in Arabic English translation. And I hope somebody will try to study them. However, my point of view is a bit very specific about culture. It is to say that culture is not restricted and cannot be narrowed down just to proverbs and metaphors, dead metaphors whatsoever. My point of view is that culture is there everywhere, even with simple phrases. Let's say, for example, that somebody is saying, the man is writing a letter. This is a very straightforward sentence, and it can be translated readily into Arabic as يكتب الرجل الرسالة, الرجل يكتب الرسالة, whatsoever. It's very straightforward and can be translated into Arabic. And some people would say it has nothing to do with culture. In fact, there is no cultural issue in translation here, but it has a cultural consideration to pay attention to. The suggestion that I would like to make is to borrow sometimes from Delheim's and from Muhammad Akram Sa'aduddin's heuristic checklist, and say that everything that is written or spoken has a cultural issue in terms of certain elements related to the text. We will take this example, and as I said, it just raises a question more than giving answers to them. Prophet Muhammad, in the Hijjat al-Wada', the farewell pilgrimage, made sermons to the believers. And from the very first moment, he said to them that something like أَمْوَالُكُمْ حَرَامٌ عَلَيْكُمْ. It is a long tradition, and I'm just extracting certain words. It has to do with the blood, your property, etc. I'm taking just this one, which is property. أَمْوَالُكُمْ حَرَامٌ عَلَيْكُمْ. This is part of the speech, it's not the full speech. Which means in English, your property is, this is literally speaking, is prohibited for you. In other words, this is just literal. But the communicative meaning means that your property is inviolable. In other words, your property cannot be violated, or nobody can violate the property of another person. How do we relate this one to cultural considerations? In order to understand the cultural issue of this speech or sermon, أَمْوَالُكُمْ حَرَامٌ عَلَيْكُمْ, what does it mean and how we translate it? According to Delheim's checklist, as I said, revised by Sa'aduddin, first of all, we look at the norm of interpretation, which means how do we understand that? What is the background information about it? The background information about it is that there is the farewell speech, and that Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, is giving the last instructions to his believers before he feels that he's going to pass away or to end his message. Now, what about the English text? If we translate it into English, does that reflect the same norm of interpretation? In fact, no. Simply because the reader of this English text is going to be English, American, Australian, whatsoever. Now, this person does not have the same norm of interpretation simply because this is another term. The experiential memory of Arabs is totally different from the experiential memory of the English people. The experience is different, and memory of experience of Arabs is different from memory of experience of the English people. So this is the first problem, which makes it highly cultural. The second one is about norm of interaction. Norm of interaction, it means what kind of relationship is there between the people who are talking here and listening. In Arabic, the norm of interaction is superior to inferior. In other words, there is someone who is superior talking to someone who is inferior. Again, this is a problem in the English text, but if we have to translate this Arabic speech into English, we have to find the match. In other words, we have to make it look in English like superior talking to an inferior. What about equal to equal? If we say that it's equal to equal, أموالكم حرام عليكم, it becomes like equal to equal, it becomes like an advice. So it would say, I would suggest that it would be better for you just to protect each other's property and not to violate each other's property. But this is just a suggestion for you. So you see how it changes meaning if it's equal to equal. If it's inferior, if somebody who is inferior is talking to a superior, أموالكم حرام عليكم, it could be something, for example, in translation like, sir, could you please just take my suggestion, and I would like to suggest that nobody can violate the property of any other person. Now you see how it differs in translation because we are changing the norm of interaction. But simply because it is superior to inferior, the norm of interaction here, it is somebody who is imposing a law on the people. In fact, yes, we have in Arabic, to the best of my knowledge, a law, not written law, it is just a law. The philosophy of the law, it's called the law of protected property. This is what's there, al-mal al-masmun. You can ask about it. So basically, this is what's happening. In English, we have to say, property of people shall be protected. This is the way that legal English expresses the same intention. Again, in the ethno-linguistic heuristic checklist, originally developed by Delheims, we talk about the participant who is the speaker and who is spoken to. The participants are, first of all, the speaker, who is here in this case, Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. And we have the addressee, the addresser, and we have the addressee. Now here is the problem. Who is the addressee? The addressee are the immediate addressee are the people who were witnessing the final pilgrimage of Prophet Muhammad. However, according to our understanding of the speech, there is a subcategory of addressee, which is the whole nation, every single person in the world who is a Muslim. So, do we translate it into English as the following? People of Mecca, my brothers, I would like just to order you, all of you here in Mecca, not to violate each other's property. If we say this, if we translate it in this way, what we're doing is that we understand that the cultural aspect of addressee is restricted only to the people who were present in the scene, and the scene is another term for the ethno-linguistic theory. But if we think that there is another addressee, which is sub-addressee, it's the whole nation, and once again the scene, it is not only in a place, specific place, Mecca, but also in the other time, other places in the world, then it's going to be totally different. The answer is going to be, a translation is going to be something like, now, it is something going to be like, no person can ever violate the property of another person. You see now the difference between them. If we think that the addressee is just a Muslim, then the translation is going to be, no Muslim in the world may violate the property of a Muslim. What about the property of a non-Muslim? If we consider the addressee, the subcategory of the addressee to be also non-Muslims, then it's going to be no person, whoever this person is, a Muslim or non-Muslim, can violate or may violate the property of another person, whatever his religion is. Now, we move forward with the list about the heuristic checklist, as I said. We said about normal interpretation, normal interaction, and participants. We talk about the tone. In other words, the key. This is what Delheim says. The key, in other words, in Arabic we call it al-atifa. What is the tone? What is the atifa? Is it appealing to people? Is it, please, I want you not to do any kind of a sinful act because this is wrong, to violate the property of each other? This is what is meant? Somebody would say no, and I agree, simply because the tone, according to the text and the context that we have, has nothing to do with an appeal or a kind of this emotional appeal to touching the hearts of people. It is something totally different. It is here in this context authoritative. In other words, somebody has the authority and he is giving an authoritative tone. And when we have authoritative tone, what is the match in English? It is by using shall. For example, if you say that, as we say in the stories, in the fairy tales, somebody would say وقال له الأمير وقال الملك إن من يشفي ابنته سوف يتزوجها. Now the key here is authoritative. It is a rule. If we translate that into English, we don't say anybody who cures the princess is going to marry her. We say everybody who cures the princess shall marry her. This is because the key is authoritative. So we have addresser, addressee, and we have the key, and we have the participant. What else do we have? We have other elements of the model developed originally by Delheims and revised by Sa'd-ed-Din. But at the end of the day, if my discussion holds water, if I am true in what I am saying, then I feel that there would be only one translation. There couldn't be more than one translation for anything that can be said, either in Arabic or in English. By following this heuristic checklist, I find that this hadith, this speech made by Prophet Muhammad at that time, is authoritative, it is superior to inferior, it's a blah blah blah, addresser, addressee, etc. If we match them to the English context, we will find ourselves confined now to one single translation. It's going to be something along the lines of, no one may violate the property of any other person. This is what I think is going to be the correct translation. Other phrasing of this translation could be like, properties of human beings shall be inviolable. This is another one, but it's a bit freer than it's not literal as the one that I offered before. Culture and translation, this is a very big issue to talk about, but next time maybe I will talk about another issue in translation, about culture as well, but this time I will talk about a research that I made one day, and it's published in Peter Newmark's Journal of Specialized Translation. It's highly cultural, and let me just say something to you. Maybe you're going to be surprised that the corpus of the research, it is an article that I translated from English into Arabic. It took me 9 years. Sorry, it's not 9 years, I think 7 years, because another article took me 11 years to translate. This one took me about 7 years to translate from English into Arabic. There's no surprise. It is highly cultural. And I made a video in Arabic about that, and I will explain that later on in English as well. This translation too, it took me so long to translate that article, not because I cannot translate it, but because I needed a theory. I needed a theory to base my translation on. This is what I made, and I did that. It is now published anyway in that journal. It was published about 10 years ago, something that was one of the biggest achievements that I have made in my life after getting the master's degree in translation. The message that I have now, try to see the heuristic checklist by Muhammad Akram Sa'd-ed-Din, or Delheims' original checklist for cultural issues, and try to focus also on another thing that I just mentioned from the very beginning, which is dead metaphors. Dead metaphors is under-researched. If you want to make a research on cultural translation, think about it carefully. Maybe it's going to be helpful. Thank you for your time listening to me, and we'll see you next time with another episode of this series, which is called More Questions Than Answers. Goodbye.